Hello, welcome to another episode of SaaS Scaled. I'm pleased to have Mike Palmer with me at this episode. Hi, Mike. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the company?
Hi, Arman. Sure. Obviously, my name is Mike Palmer. I'm the CEO of Sigma Computing. Sigma, and I think as you know, because you're in our industry as well, works at the data analytics layer
Mhm.
for customers that have moved into kind of the cloud data warehouse era. So we pride ourselves on creating an interface for everyone that ranges from a data scientist writing Python all the way to a business user, or so to speak, that has spent their life in a spreadsheet and can now do that on the cloud.
Fantastic. Uh, I'm pretty sure it was not like one day, you uh, got out of the bed and said, I want to start Sigma today. Most of the time, that normally happens during the time. What particular events triggered that from your perspective? I know that you have been head of product at the company, and of course, as a head of product, you are working with product, you are working with sales, you are working with market, you have a good view of the whole industry. But what else? And I know that definitely product people in charge of product, CPOs, are the best candidates to really think very comprehensively about the market, product, customers. But additionally, what made you think that this is really what I would like to do? It's a big effort as a founder, putting a lot
Well,
of years into it.
well, the interesting thing here is that I was not a founder of Sigma.
Oh, okay.
And so we had a really interesting sort of situation at Sigma where we have two amazing co-founders at the company, Rob Will and Jason Franz, who
Okay.
themselves have super interesting backgrounds ranging from building large scale platforms. If you remember way back in the day, J2E platforms like BEA, WebLogic. Rob was
Mm.
later at Salesforce, obviously another big platform provider. Jason has a history in databases, and in particular was one of the early consulting engineers on Snowflake. Uh, and I think when they met at Sutter Hill, they
Mm.
saw a cloud world that was emerging, obviously in parallel with Snowflake developing out of Sutter Hill. And what they set out to do is something we're still doing today, and that is, how do we create a product for the average person to use? I think, and I share this belief with them. Silicon Valley, for since let's say the 1990s, has really done an exceptional job of building technical tools for technical people. There's been that IT budget has been a ripe source of growth for Silicon Valley companies, uh, but no one's really focused on the average person. And with all of this technology transformation in the cloud over the last 10 to 15 years, now with cloud data warehousing, with products like Databricks and Snowflake, um, what's the impact to the average person? And I think they set out to try to pull through all of that infrastructure change so that someone shows up to their job and is more empowered. Uh, I came along 4 years ago, as you just described, uh, with a very product focused mentality, a very product market fit focused mentality. And where I think Rob, Jason, and I complemented each other was their ability to, first of all, engineer a great product, focus on an extensible platform with, let's say, more focus on how we go use case by use case and actually deliver value to customers, practically speaking, in a constant stream. So very fortuitous sort of introduction for me 4 years ago, and obviously things have gone quite well since then.
Fantastic. And one of the things that, of course, any SaaS company needs to pay attention to, as you rightfully mentioned it in our previous brief discussion, was really the net dollar retention of customers. Because at the end of the day, SaaS is a subscription business. Can you expand upon that, please?
Yeah, and it's funny because when you come to a product market fit company, or a company that is pre-product market fit, the first order of business is logos, largely because you're trying to use those logos to figure out, is your product adding value? Is it going to beat the competitor? Is it different enough for the customer to change? But once you get to that product market fit and you start thinking about building a long-term business, the economics become your number one concern.
Mm-hmm.
And getting into a net dollar retention mentality, which basically means two things. One is that when you've sold a customer, you renew them. And economically
Mm-hmm.
speaking, if you want to grow a company sustainably, you have to rely on your renewals base to be there for you at a greater than 90% rate every single year. But if you want to grow efficiently, you then need to look at kind of the what we call NACV, but the net new dollars coming into the business.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to think about getting not 120%, which today is considered best in class, but really more like in the 130, 140%.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that dollar acquisition cost is anywhere between 5 and 25 times cheaper than trying to find a net new logo. So if
Yes.
you're going to get post product market fit and you're trying to scale, especially in a world where investors are increasingly looking for good economies of scale, net dollar retention is definitely the number to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm. And how does it relate to the old idea of land and expand, or for example, the maybe product led growth? And there are some other related topics to that. Does it does it mean that probably if the product can, in a way, easier promote itself, no product sells itself, but if theoretically the product can sell itself, and if we can really land and expand, probably those parameters would play much nicer and better, right?
I think there are so many models that you just articulated. We both work in the space where customers, for example, will embed our products. And from a provider standpoint, if you were working way back in the software days, you remember things like OEM agreements. Where your
Hmm.
product would be sold packaged inside of someone else's product, and that would generate a revenue stream for you. And through that revenue stream, you had very low sales and marketing costs because
Hmm.
it was the provider of the product that embedded you that was driving the growth for you. And that's certainly a model that's still true in SaaS today. In terms of expanding, though, I think most of us are tapping every technique. We're trying to tap PLG and really see that sort of like organic growth, cross departmental, or let's say further departmentally penetrating. But we still have to rely on our sales teams and our customer success teams to demonstrate new use case value, to be able to bring new features and make sure those features are deployed for customers. So I think it turns out to be not a story of are you a PLG company or not. It turns out to be a story of ands. We are taking advantage of all of the techniques to
Hmm.
that are relevant, really, to try to penetrate an enterprise.
Yeah, yeah, no, makes sense. I mean, PLG, of course, has had some pros, and like everything else, it's not a perfect model, has pros and cons, and both sides needs to be weighted, of course. Um, I hear, since both of us are in analytic world, and one question that I bet you have heard as many times as I hear is AI coming to the world of analytics. And
Yeah.
of course, AI becoming more and more into everything we do, almost like a new electricity that you don't see it, but it's there. What's your take on AI? I'm pretty sure that there are tons of things that you guys are doing on the AI side. I know that there is a new event you have with new AI development releases. Uh, can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. I I use a lot of metaphors in my sort of storytelling, walking around in the world,
Mhm.
and I believe that and as a person that lives in San Francisco for the last 30 years, uh, I use the gold mining metaphor for AI because I think there are two ways to look at what's happening today. There is the gold, and for me, the gold is the direct value AI may be providing to a use case. It could be that you've deployed it in your customer success team. It could be that you are figuring out new ways to analyze unstructured data that you have access to. But there's also what I refer to as picks and shovels. And picks and shovels are something that everybody needs if they're going to go gold mining, right? Not everyone finds gold. Uh, and for me, the picks and shovels of AI are infrastructure. They answer questions like, can I trust this data? Can I
Mhm.
repeat the findings of AI? Is it auditable? If I work in a
Mhm.
regulated industry, do I understand who's used it? And do I understand when they used it? Do I understand what decision they made based on AI being part of the process? And I think that we're not talking enough as an industry goes not just about the use cases, but rather the sustainable adoption of AI as it evolves over time. Uh, Rob Willen, I think, as I mentioned, a co-founder at Sigma, uses the cell phone as a metaphor here. You know, when we all had our first cell phones in the mid '90s, the coolest thing about them was that we could make a phone call when we weren't at home. Uh, and you look at your phone today, and I think my kids tell me I'm just not cool because I call somebody, right? I should be texting them instead. You know, the value in the phone are the myriad apps, that we've deployed. And I think AI, if we look into the future, is going to have use cases that we can't even fathom today. So for us in enterprise and at Sigma, we're really trying to work to give something that is going to enable the ongoing adoption as AI changes, to make that trustworthy, to make it secure, to make it auditable, to make it sustainable in effect.
And so you have a good point. So data is really the foundation. Anyway, we need to build a good data foundation that is not going away, and that is what empowering really AI. So first, before you think about a good AI, you need to think about a good kind of foundation for your data, and that's where most of the functionality of the analytic tool and data tools are. Now, do you see any at any point uh, the whole dashboard is being replaced by somebody just typing in a prompt something and say I got the result I want? Because that's really at the end of the day people are thinking about, is it just a reality, is going to be a reality maybe 25 years from now but not today? Because uh, I would tell you that from my perspective, that's I don't see how it can be a reality in the very near future. But I will not deny it that at one point maybe that dream come true. But still, we are far from that. It's just autonomous cars. That if you really expect 100% of the cars in the U.S. become autonomous in the next 2 years, that's probably wishful thinking. But if you are thinking about a century from now, everything will be autonomous, that's not wishful thinking. It's just the timeline normally, practically, is not going to be the day, 2 days from today, right? So it
Yep.
takes time. And I
Yeah.
would love to, gain your insight on that as well.
Well, I mean, I think you and I would be in a probably very strong agreement in general. I tend to boil things down to, does technology expect humans to change?
Mhm,
And if the technology expects humans to change, then it's probably going to be a slow evolution. Uh,
mhm,
Data, we have a long, people have, hundreds, thousands of years of in some way engaging with data. I don't think because AI came around, we are going to become a society of people that asks a chatbot a question and then gets an answer and that we're going to be satisfied.
mhm,
People have a very iterative relationship with data. And that iteration includes questions that come up as you see it. It's not that you had a preformed singular idea, and if you just got the answer to that question, you were on your way. Um, Often, when you see data presented to you in a certain format, it inspires you to think about another question. And that sort of process is something that I don't think AI necessarily, at least in the format we're talking about in question and answer, necessarily fosters. I really do think, on the other hand, that it complements the work we do today. I think there is a lot of friction in the case, for example, of finding simple answers, uh, for users to get those answers. I think AI helps. I think there's a lot of preparatory data work that could be done by AI before you start to get value. But I think once that's there, I think there's a relationship between the interface and the user that complements, that self reinforcing, that I'm not sure that AI plays into yet. And I'm not sure that it doesn't. What I'm pretty sure of, though, is that the technology is going to change, but people will change more slowly than that. So to your point about autonomous vehicles, it's this parallel march of what can the tech do? What does it enable for an end user? Does it really make their life better? And they'll make a little change. And then they'll make a subsequent little change. And the world, it will evolve that way. And I expect the same thing to happen in our space as well.
Now, a little bit talking about SaaS in a bigger picture. Um, SaaS started, of course, from not it's not something that just started last year. It has been around as a concept for a while, and maybe it was in a more kind of hosted environment, meaning that one customer had one hosted solution, and then it evolved to SaaS, meaning multi-tenant kind of a style. And then now we have the SaaS in a full motion. All of these security things have figured out, and people have more trust in cloud and putting their applications in the cloud, and going multi-tenant and those kind of things. Moving forward, how do you see SaaS in general, and the cloud in general, and people are going to really put all of these applications? Do we have too many products in the market today? Because for everything you can imagine there is a SaaS application. Is it going to really increase, and just we should see a still continued kind of growth from your perspective? One of the metrics that you can monitor is product management itself. We didn't have as many product managers as we have now, and part of the reason is SaaS, because the SaaS products came and created a lot of opportunities for creating all of these products that each of them needed product management. uh,
Yeah.
how do you see the trend moving forward with regard to cloud and SaaS and creating these products?
I personally, I think that we have far too many SaaS products. Uh, and I think that they are far too point solution. I think they're far too departmentally siloed. Uh, I present to folks kind of a vision, or not vision, I should say, a sort of the opposite of that, kind of how we got here. And if you think back to where, the formative part of, for example, my career was in data center technology, and you understood, you'd walk into a data center and there would be all these brand name storage devices, and there would be all these brand name servers, and then there would be applications on top of them. And you'd realize like how much silo there was in that data center. And that when we adopted the public cloud, we eliminated those silos at the infrastructure layer. We don't know where our data is stored in AWS. We don't care what kind of disk it was. We don't care what the vendor was. We don't ask who the server vendor is, right? We have fluidity, in terms of compute and storage adoption. And I think when we started to move down the path of cloud databases, we did the same to that layer. Customers that deploy Snowflake or a Databricks, they, for the first time, have access to all of their data tables in one pool, and they can uh, access that data at huge scale on demand, or they could access it in much smaller quantities. Uh, but that's a sort of flexibility they never had before in the data center, where we always had to make trade-offs between storage and compute and scale from a cost and performance standpoint. But when we moved to the cloud, somehow we took the same siloed applications. To your point earlier, we made them multi-tenant, we stuck them on top of the new infrastructure.
Mhm,
And so if you create two boxes, we have this new infrastructure of scalable, fluid, available storage and compute, and now database, same old silos of applications on the top with the same sort of constrained schemas, the lack of integration, the need to manage them. I think SaaS is the next layer that will be disrupted in the constant march toward cloud adoption. I think we're going to move from a world of what's referred to as best of breed software, which is in effect a specified fit for purpose workflow, to end to end software, where we can build custom workflows based on our availability of data in the cloud data warehouses, where there's less silo, where there is more sort of citizen availability or skill set, if you will, to be able to build
mhm,
those workflows. Uh, if you ask an average enterprise whether they wanted to have 30 departmental SaaS applications, I think they would have said that we would have wanted to avoid that situation.
mhm.
And I think that's the path that we're now starting to embark on.
And how does it relate to the no code and low code environments that are emerging as well? Because most organizations may be getting to the point that, maybe we should have more flexible kind of app builders rather than just, having these custom solutions.
It's a great question. I think the march of time from a technology standpoint is that it always starts with an expert and it always ends being democratized.
Mhm,
And having made available these infrastructure layers up through the database, I do believe, to your point, that building workflows is now going to be the job of the person who has the departmental workflow knowledge,
mhm,
which is to say They don't need to go to an SI. They don't need to go to even their own development team in order to build a workflow that is core to their job. They know their job. They know the actions they need to take and when they need to take them. I think we're emerging to a world where the logic and the data are now available for the end user to configure their own workflow and, in effect, automate their own jobs.
Mhm.
That for me looks like what's the next 3 to 5 years is going to, in addition to AI, of course, what's where productivity and enhancements are going to come from.
And looking at the data, the more flexibility we are going to offer to applications, that requires also more flexibility on the data side. And it will
Yes.
require data to be extremely fluid in order to really, create those applications or let those applications to behave and foster those kind of logic that any organization, any department wants to have. Um, do you see increasingly data evolving into a kind of model that is more fluid? Because if you go back to, for example, 90s, mostly it's rows and columns, what you
Mhm.
see. And when you look at the data today, video is there, voice is there, unstructured documents, any type of, and even, getting the data in different shapes and forms. How do you see evolving that part that fostered the whole flexibility we are talking about?
And this is where I think we're seeing the most, if you will, disruption in the data space, right? Is how do we think about the value of our structured data and all of the virtues it brought with it, in terms of its searchability and the lineage and all of the things that we have built systems to manage so well. But how do we bring that together with this massive amount of unstructured data
Mhm.
that AI is frankly giving us better access to, giving us uh, a better way to summarize, a better way to interrogate? And how do we bring that unstructured data together with our structured data? And I
Mhm.
think we're just at the tip of the iceberg exploring the sort of the benefits of bringing those two types of data sets together, about how to bring LLMs together with classic analytics and ML. You see providers like Sigma, but also like the database providers, really kind of going after this space. Now, I think in the customer's world, as always, there's this balance between the opportunity, how do I get better value out of my data, and the cost, uh, because deploying these models is still not inexpensive, and we're going to have to constantly ask ourselves, where's the opportunity? I think we've gone through a period maybe now, for the last year and a half, where there's a lot of experimentation,
Mhm.
a lot of exploration, but not necessarily a lot of ROI measurement. And I think this is going to quickly become the primary sort of question for everybody when it comes to uh, unstructured data and AI.
Now, going back to the point that at the beginning you raised, and that the net retention dollar, and you defined that as a kind of main goal, especially at the phase that you are thinking long term about a SaaS business, right? And you mentioned that at the beginning, any SaaS business, of course, needs to collect some logos and bring some customers to create the product market fit, all of those things that at the beginning they need. And then they get to the phase that they need to really go and just think about the long term, and that's what matters. And if they can retain customers, and especially if you can really expand within your customer base, because that's the lowest cost of customer acquisition at that point. Now, for that particular phase, if I'm a SaaS company, I'm looking long term, and I'm looking at really, I wanted to expand, and I wanted to have more efficiency and effectiveness of my business and scale. What are the advice that kind of advice that you have for those kind of companies, that this is the way you should look at the business, these are what matters most, you know as the North Star, or as the fundamentals, as the guiding principles, essentially?
It's a great question. And I feel like it kind of comes down to two categories. There's the operational category,
Mhm.
and then there is the strategy category. In the
Mhm.
operational category, you have to be A plus in what I'll just refer to as the fundamentals. Do I do deployment well?
Mhm.
Do I have exceptionally good telemetry? Do I have support engineering that my customers love?
Mhm.
If we've created a quick time to deployment so the customer sees value, if we track that value to make sure it doesn't just stop at deployment, but continues on through their journey, and that
Mhm.
when they call us for support, that we kind of go above and beyond, then
Mhm.
we've set the right operational rigor and cadence to have confidence that we can move to strategy. On the strategy side, I use this metric, and I have for a long time, certainly here at Sigma, is that we think about our engineering allocation in the following way. We spend 20 to 25% of our quarterly allocation on things like security, infrastructure, development, productivity, and so forth. We always spend 20 to 30% on something innovative, by the definition of
Mhm.
which is that no one else is doing it. And then, of
Mhm.
course, we're spending, let's say 40% or 50% on what I refer to as loyalty features, but they tend to be competitive things. And I
Mhm.
raise this because when you've established a rock solid relationship with your install base
Mhm.
and you want to drive growth, this now becomes the best place to find your next product market fit.
Mhm.
These are customers that trust you. They want to
Right.
engage with you. You already have contracts with them. They get value in that fact that your product is expanding with them. And you tend not to have a very high barrier to entry because it's not like they're coming from some other product. So the strategy part becomes not just are we delivering a great product, but this is now the platform for us to further build our product and expand our market, working with our customers. And then, of course, you take those findings back into the new logo market. So I think that when you can get those two flywheels moving, uh, lots of beneficial things happen, right? Acquisition becomes cheaper, product development becomes cheaper, customer satisfaction goes up. I could keep going, but this is the magic of software and SaaS if you can get it going.
No, that's great point, and um, fantastic points you highlighted. Appreciate it. I think the audience will definitely love it too. Uh, thank you very much again for joining us. I would like to really end the discussion with a question about the books or a book that you like personally or professionally. And you may say, this is the book that I like, or some books that I liked most, and it was impactful, and share it with the audience if it's possible.
That is a great question. I tend to read multiple books at the same time very slowly, but I'll tell you one that I feel like asked a really interesting question, and I have thought about a lot, and it's called The Good Life. And if you're not familiar with The Good Life, Uh, it is the summary of a research project that started at Harvard 100 years ago, basically. And the
Right.
question was, what makes people happy? And it was such a unique question because at the time, and even today, most questions revolve around what makes people sick. And then the question becomes, how do we cure them? And this took the exact opposite approach. And it was a longevity study that lasted, 80 years or something like that. And they boiled down happiness to just a very few simple factors. And you read the book and you hear the stories behind them, and it really resonates. And I think we're all here. We're building businesses and hopefully having a good time at work, but we're here to live, a really sort of engaging and productive life. And understanding what makes us happy, I think is a key question. And so I recommend that book.
Fantastic. No, that's a great perspective to have. So, um, again, appreciate it. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. It was a great
Thank you for
discussion.
having me. Pleasure.